Okay, I think we can start now. Yeah, who am I? You probably see the background there, of Machu Picchu, and probably you guess it's Cusco. And my name is Jeffrey Rodriguez. I'm Peruvian, right? I'm a senior big data engineer, tech security leader, or whatever that means, and I work for IBM. I'm a Apache and Hadoop and Knox contributor. I've been contributing into Knox for probably a couple of years. And I used to be a former, Apache Services J committer, a long time ago. And so far for me. So what we're going to talk today, and I want to focus on two things, right? So if you come out of this presentation with two things in mind, is that Knox, right, Apache Knox, gives you a way to be able to extend your APIs, so you're able to build applications, right? And so that you can actually use an enterprise. And Apache Knox is a proxy for interacting with Apache Hadoop clusters in a secure way. And you ask yourself, why is, somebody didn't think about, oh, maybe I'm going to use Nginx or HTTP Apache, right? And why we're going to have this Knox project. And I asked, the crowd, to tell me, how many of them have used Knox, right? And fortunately, do we have any Knox committers? Oh, you're a committer. Excellent. What's your name?
Billy Doray.
Okay, well, I've probably seen your JIRAs, right? And
I did the original Kerberos for Knox.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, actually that was really good contribution. So that actually is where we're going to start, right? So by that time you had to add to all these proxies, like Nginx and Apache, all the capabilities like how to access Kerberos, right? And how to provide service level access, right? And how you can actually add, single sign-on, right? You probably had to add a lot of code onto these other proxies, right? And so this project from the very beginning had the goal to be able to provide you with this proxy, and so you can secure, your HTTP access. So one of the things that has happened now, starting in versions 0.8, I believe, and today we're on version 0.12, and the version 0.13 is the one that is on the working version, and the project is starting to think about coming out with a version 1.0.0. But starting in version 0.8, there was a commit that basically added, Pack4j, and so we'll talk about Pack4j, and then we will talk about what does it mean, having single sign-on. We'll talk about SAML, and we'll talk about, what does it mean for an enterprise to be able to create applications that can take, the ability to be able to use single sign-on, and but not only that, right? So the other big idea here, as I told you, there were two things. The other one is, many of you have the problem, right, of managing identity providers, right? Doing identity management, right? So you add users, you delete users, you change, authorization of users, and so the ability to have single sign-on and support SAML gives Knox, right, or gives your applications to Knox the ability to be able to take advantage, right, of this identity management, right? Otherwise, think about in your enterprise, you have LDAP servers, right? And not all LDAP servers are the same, you have Active Directory, you have Open LDAP, and you start proliferating those, right? So in a given enterprise, you may have Open LDAP, you may have Active Directory, and also, you may have Kerberos, you may have free IPA, et cetera, right? So the idea here, is take all these middleware, which is, your authentication middleware, and maybe all this middleware can be pushed into the IDP, the identity provider, a service, right? And so we will talk about identity providers, and let me continue. So probably you know the case for single sign-on, right? You have used that many times, when you access, your Google account, your Facebook account. The idea here is you sign out once, and then you are able to access all the other applications, that are supported through, through the web, just using, what is called a token, right? So single-on federation, right? So Knox SSO is not a Kerberos or LDAP replacement, but an effective way to distribute enterprise authentication resources. No, that's what I just said, right? You do not longer need to proliferate authentication resources, LDAP, KDCs, et cetera. But you can put these resources behind identity providers. And some of them are, commercial ones. Some of them are quite good. And some of them are like open source, if somebody wants to build this, you can do that. And you can also do identity management through these IDP services, right? So that, just by taking advantage of that, single sign-on, you can solve the problem of identity management by, putting, access or your resources, your LDAP, your, KDC, et cetera, being, replicated into the IDP, right? And we manage, the access to your application through that. So I think I talked a little bit, about Apache. It's a system that provides single point of authentication and access for Apache Hadoop services. It provides the following features: single REST API access, centralized authentication, authorization, and auditing for Hadoop REST HTTP services. Also, we support, user interfaces, right? So even though, today you get HTTP, HTTP has the service definitions, right? For, let's say, ADFS UI, has for Yarn UI. And even though those may not be, set up by default in HTTP, you can actually, turn them on, right? So you care about, you have all these user interfaces that are provided by Hadoop. You can actually, and then, let's say you are in a cloud environment, and customers, want to have also the user interfaces being secure, right? And they being accessed through SSL, because in the front end in Knox, the access through Knox is through a URL, which is, uses SSL, right? And there's, it has, the ability to be able to have, SSL. You can actually, you have different ways to set up SSL. And so, well, let's talk about the identity provider, right? So identity provider is defined as a kind of provider that creates, maintains, and manages identity information for principals and provide principal authentication to other service providers within a federation, such as with web browser profiles. Again, this is the whole idea. These identity providers are basically, you want to access a resource, as in, let's say an endpoint service, a web HDFS, or you want to access even a user interface. Here, once you turn on a single sign-on, the access, the URL, the endpoint is safe, right? And then, there is a redirection to the identity provider. You get a secure token, right? And in this case, there is different ways to set up these security tokens, right? So one of them could be JWT, right, which is JSON web token, or which I think is used by OAuth, or also OpenID. We do the same. Or you can actually use SAML, right? And through this Pack4J contribution, we have support for SAML too, right? And then we will talk a little bit more about SAML too. So today you pick up HTTP 2.60. There is I would think I would define it as two forms of a single sign-on, right? So one is what is called AK local SSO, which is a form-based identity provider. So Knox has provided an application, and this is a J2E application. It's a provider, right? So Knox itself is a J2E set of filters, right? J2E filters. And so they have provided a way to be able to have a form that could be customized. And the authentication here is done through the JSON token, JWT. And basically this gives you, yes, today you get 2.60. You have support, right, for single sign-on, and using this JWT for Ambari, for Ranger, for Atlas, and you can set up your own applications too, right? And here, we're not using SAML, right? So we're using JWT. So by default, early in the project, they had this provider, right? So when I say a provider within a Knox definitions, a provider is basically a filter, right? So that's J2E filter. And the other one, which is the more powerful, in my mind, which is the SAML-based identity provider. And this leverages this Pack4J, right? And that gives support to SAML, CAS, OAuth, OpenID, and also required changes to Knox SSO.xml topology, right? So one thing that you had to deal with, in Knox is this XML file, which is called the topology file, right? And that topology file defines a chain of filters, right, that you can apply. Some of them could be the authentication. Usually the entry point for Knox is the authentication, right, which provides you with basic authentication. And so you get HTTP out of the box. That's usually what is used for authentication, right? And then you have a change of filters there. One that gives you the you can set up the authorization, the service level authorization, and then there is the end of the chain is a dispatcher, and the dispatcher basically is just an application. It's part of the filter chain. They access the actual endpoint, which is the service, right? And at the time of this presentation, there is no support for establishing groups from the SAML assertion, and the participating applications must use group lookup to establish group membership based on username, right? And what this means is that we can authenticate given the username, but we can establish what membership this user belongs to. And but I think this is something that will be somebody. I think there's already open Jira for this, and the community will contribute this. So single sign-on providers. So case allows a web application builder like our demo Knox Explorer in a different domain reach out Hadoop HDFS cluster data in a secure way and process, transform, analyze such data. So if you look at the on the community, there is a demo, right? There's actually two demos. So one of the demos is very simple. It's just an application that sits, could sit in your laptop, and so basically just you can set up your Knox with SAML, and basically this means changes into the topology, and then basically the application that you set up in your laptop will actually try to access your cluster that contains HDFS, and then when the application runs, basically the first thing is tries to access the resource, and then because we set up the topology, there's going to be a redirection, right? And we set up the redirection here in the demo. Basically, they just redirect to Okta, right? So Okta is an IDP. It is an software as a service, commercial service, right? That you can subscribe, and then basically that gives you with the ability to be able to use the single sign-on, right? So. And the way this works, again, so we try to access the resource HDFS in your cluster from your laptop. There is a redirection to actually the URL is saved, and then the redirection there is to the Okta cloud service, and with your your subscription information, and then after you authenticated you're giving back a token, right? And this is a JWT token, and then you can continue, through Knox to the service. And so this is, what I was added in Knox 0.80 to give SSO support to CAS, Auth, OpenID, SAML. And so again, so Pack4J, is also an open source project. It's a Java security engine to authenticate users, get their profiles, and manage their authorization in order to secure Java web applications, right? It supports many authentication mechanisms for UI and web services, and is implemented by many frameworks and tools, right? For Knox, it is used as a federation provider to support OAuth and all the protocols we mentioned. So these are the different components that you have in Hadoop that provides this SSO service, right? So one of them is the Knox SSO default form-based IDP, and this is the default configuration of Knox SSO provides a form-based authentication mechanism, and you can actually modify this out of the box. Basically, it has a look, but you can change the look for your enterprise. Pack4J is the set of libraries that support that SSO, and the header pre-auth is a simple mechanism of propagating the identity through HTTP headers and specify the username and group for the authenticated user. This has been built with vendor use cases such as SiteMinder and IBM Tivoli Access Manager. And this was added very early in the project life. So also, this is a Knox SSO, which is a provider, and this is this service is an integration service that provides a normalized SSO token for representing the authenticated user. Now, this token is generally used for web SSO capabilities, for participating UIs and the consumption of the Apache Hadoop REST APIs. So Knox SSO abstracts the actual identity provider integration away from participating applications so that they only need to be aware of the Knox SSO cookie. Okay, so all these tokens are cookies, right? So the token is presented by the browser as a cookie, and applications that are participating in the Knox SSO integration and able to cryptographically validate the presented token and remain agnostic to the underlying SSO integration, right? So once you authenticate, with the IDP provider, basically just is as if, the IDP wasn't there, right? So, okay, so SAML, almost other non-SSO solutions, follow this similar pattern. So in single sign-on on the web, you usually, have all these protocols, right? So one is SAML. The other ones are the ones I mentioned before, like OAuth and OpenID, and they basically, all they follow, the same pattern, right? So if you look at you start by requesting a service, right? And then And then there is basically what amounts to a redirection. So the URL is safe, and there is a redirection to the identity provider, right? So once the authentication, which may be against behind LDAP or Kerberos in the identity provider, there is an assertion, and basically the assertion allows you to be issued a token, and this token basically allows you to have access to the service. And this is a flow. This is actually part of the developers' documentation in Knox. And then you can see here what we're doing, right? So user browser makes requests without valid token. So here we're talking about the filters in SSO. So all filtering in UI detects no invalid token redirects to the Knox SSO. The Knox SSO was this filter, this provider in Knox, and preserving the UI origin URL, right? So the service, the endpoint, right? And so then the browser follows redirect, right? And then Knox SSO finds no invalid token redirects to SAML IdP, right? In this case, could be Okta, could be Shibboleth, could be whatever identity provider you're using. And then there's a post, browser follows redirect. So SAML IdP presents login form to the user. So you're presented with a, with a pop-up to put your credentials. User provides credentials to IdP via login form. SAML IdP validates credentials. And the IdP redirects back to Knox origin. So once you have been authenticated, and then so the IdP redirects back to the Knox origin URL with SAML assertion in form post, right? So the Knox SSO converts the SAML assertion to a Knox SSO cookie and extracts the UI origin from the original URL cookie. So Knox SSO redirects client back to the UI origin URL with the Knox SSO cookie. So the browser follows redirect to the URL's origin URL with a JWT bearer, right? So here, the access to the service here will have the JWT cookie, the JSON web token, and then from this point, the JWT bearer token validates with the out filter in UI. So the out filter is basically the provider by Knox that will do the out filter. And then request process and response return to client, right? So from this point on, basically you just, once you are authenticated, you get the request to the service, and then you get the response. So we talk about these IdP services, right? So, and one that enterprise uses quite often is just because many enterprises use Active Directory, right? So in Windows, and then basically there is an extension to Active Directory which allows to issue SAML and to be able to deal with SAML as an IdP, right? So many enterprises, that use Active Directory, they actually set up this this ADFS to be able to provide single sign-on to their applications, right? Shibboleth, they have enterprise and they have a cloud IdP. They also have open source, IdP, right? That you can actually install using Docker, and then you can actually set it up to be accessed, by Knox, right? So, and then there is Bluemix single sign-on for Bluemix and Bluemix Identity Bridge, IBM Tivoli Federated Identity Manager. Here, these two ones are, quite interesting. The Microsoft Azure Active Directory, Centrify, and there is there are many IdP identity providers services, right? Another one that is used quite often is this WSO Identity Manager.
What about SiteMinder?
Yeah, SiteMinder is, of course, IBM SAML is, actually that was added quite early in that project. But yeah, that is also an IDP. So here, basically, as I said, most of these follow the same pattern, right? So it's you can configure FS service in AD Active Directory, so ADFS can serve as an IDP server and support SAML, right? So here, it's basically, how is we talk about this pattern, right? And this is a pattern that is followed by most web IDPs. And so one thing that I wanted to make sure in this presentation is to talk about Shibboleth IdP 3x service. And so Shibboleth is a standard-based open source software package for web single sign-on across within organizational boundaries. Open source projects providing IDP through SAML and supports SAML 2.0. And one thing that's quite interesting is that you can set up Shibboleth with free IPA, right? So I don't know, are you familiar with free IPA? So free IPA basically bundles Kerberos KDC with LDAP, right? And it's also like an open source identity management, right? And you have a UI, you can add users, you can delete users, you can change authorizations, and that's a good way to manage users in a cluster, right? And the version that I'm recommending is this Shibboleth IOP version 3. You can either build it from source, or you can try the Docker image, right? So the conclusion, basically, so Knox provides a secure SSL access to Hadoop REST APIs and UIs. If you haven't used Knox, basically, once you set up your service, you access the service through a Knox URL, and the Knox URL is set by with SSL, right? The support SSO by Knox allows to manage authentication in a more efficient and manageable way by leveraging identity provider services through SAML, right? So, and then you can either use a commercial SaaS identity provider like Okta, or roll your own using your existing enterprise middleware like ADFS, or even using the open source Shibboleth, right? We will add a Shibboleth IDP Knox SSO demo and provide future blogs on this integration, right? So that's one thing that I'm planning on doing. I'm going to open Jira, and I want to contribute a demo. The current demo that they have is they're using this service which is called Okta, right? But that's not that's a commercial one, right? So what I want to do is I want to bundle Shibboleth, and I want to have this nice demo that can show the single sign-on that you can probably set up in your own laptop. And Knox supports SSO for Ambari, Apache Ranger, and Apache Atlas, right? And this is, you can find this in Ambari 2.60. And in the documentation that basically tell you, what you need to do to set up all these three components, right? And all that support is done through the Knox supported the single sign-on. So here, I'll leave you for questions, right? Maybe you have questions about Knox and about services. Yeah, sure.
So earlier this week, we learned about setting up a gateway for Knox behind like an F5 load balancer.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on that or observations?
Yeah, so I done some work now on setting it, high availability through F5. You can do also load balancing, so I try 3 different types of software. In this case, solutions to do balancing and high availability. So I try HA proxy. I try Apache mode and balancer, and the third one is just escapes my mind right now. But Nginx, right? And so the best solution I found using software, not in this case, F5, was Apache mode with the balancer mode, right? And the reason was very simple, right? So the HA proxy doesn't allow me to end the SSL connection because you think that Knox, the access to Knox is through SSL, right? So I couldn't. There were no extensions to be able to end the SSL connection and start the access to the service, right? Because the way that Knox works is basically you have a URL, you access Knox, right? And so the request goes here, and then from here, there is a HTTP client, and then the HTTP client is access the service, right? And but in the case of Apache, I was able to do that, right? So basically, what that means, and the case was very similar for Nginx and for HA proxy. I wasn't able to end the SSL connection, right? So the load balancing and the HA is only done at the TCP level, right? And while in the case of Apache, I was able to end up, the SSL connection and start the HTTP client, from the client endpoint of Knox, right? And why is that important, right? Because you want to do rewrites, right? So one big feature of Knox is you can rewrite the requests and the responses, right? And there's for user interfaces that's quite important, right? And I would imagine also for APIs also quite important. So, okay. Well, thanks. You can always forward the questions to the community, and I look forward to you guys start using Knox if you have it.